Sublime Text. A lot of nerdy programmers use Sublime Text as a Mac and a PC version. Free, you can download, and then when you open something like an HTML file or a JavaScript file, it'll recognize what type of code it is and give you that proper code hinting. So you don't have to necessarily download, but it can be helpful if you're starting to edit code in a file outside of Animate. Animate has, its own code editor built into it, the Actions panel that has, a little bit of code hinting. These other things work with even more code hinting and options to do stuff. So download, or if you don't want, if you just want to use Notepad or WordPad on PC, you should be able to open up an HTML file, or if you use Text Edit on a Mac. If you use Text Edit, there's one trick we'll have to do. Let me open this again in Text Edit. I go open with Text Edit. Now for me, it's showing the code, but probably if it's the first time you ever try and open an HTML file inside of Text Edit, it probably won't show the code. There's a preference you'll have to choose. You'd have to go to Text Edit Preferences, and then under Open and Save, you would have to check this little box that says, when opening a file, display HTML files as HTML code instead of formatted text. As long as you check that box, you would then have to close and reopen the file, and then you should see the code. But I would highly, highly recommend that you download Sublime Text, because the difference in seeing all these pretty colors versus one big mess can be really, really helpful to your eye to try and kind of separate what you're trying to look at and what you're trying to do. Bunnies, open this up in the browser and run it just to see that, again, this does not have any kind of background to it. It's just white space, and that's what we'd like to change. What we're going to be editing here is our HTML files. Now, if I look at my current project, my Bunnies website, there's only one, even though it's got all these other folders: components, images, sounds, videos. Assets is the only one we manually are putting stuff in. All these other folders, components, images, sounds, videos, that's all automatically generated from Animate when we publish it. And the other two files, besides these folders, components is generated because we have that video component in there. Images obviously grabs all of our images and has our preloader image in there. Our sounds will grab all our MP3s. Our video will grab our MP4 video, get that all ready for the web. And then it also creates a HTML file and a JavaScript file. The JavaScript file holds all of our code that we write, plus a bunch of code that gets automatically written to kind of translate what we do in the interface, like drawing shapes and stuff and organizing them on the screen into code. And then the HTML file is what's necessary to kind of hold our canvas object that all of this code runs through, so it will actually display on the screen. But what's interesting is this HTML file, both of these files really, even everything, all of this components folder, images folder, sounds folder, videos folder, HTML and JavaScript, everything besides our FLA file and our assets folder that we kind of created manually, all this other stuff gets automatically generated every time we publish the file. So it's really cool that we don't have to think about it, and we don't necessarily have to know the inner workings. It just kind of works and puts it together. We do have to kind of know what's what when we put it on the internet. But what's important is that it overwrites these every single time. Okay, so there's a special thing we have to do. Ultimately, we just need to copy and paste this part of code into the HTML file. But I'm going to show you a problem with just doing that directly. Is it's going to get overwritten and it's going to disappear. All right, every time we publish. So I could technically grab this piece of code. I'll give you more specifics about exactly what this is in a moment. If I paste that in there and save it, it changed the background color. So easy enough. I just added a little piece of code. I could change the background color. Great. I can see it here. I could change it if I wanted it bright red. I could change that to bright red, hit save. Go back, refresh it, now all of a sudden it's bright red. Crazy. But the problem is that this file, even though I have it open and I'm editing it, and as I have it open editing it and it's in the browser, I can just refresh and see the changes. The problem is as soon as I publish this again from Animate, if I hit Command Return, publish it again, it goes away. Okay, that's the problem. That's what I have to show you guys how to get around and how to create this template file that tells it what to build every single time when it overwrites itself. If I go back and look at my code, it magically just disappeared. It's just, you know, that code that I pasted in there is just magically gone every time I publish. Okay, and the reason this is happening is that by default, Adobe Animate is set up to overwrite your HTML file every single time. And you want to keep it that way because as you change fonts, as you add things like different videos and different audio and stuff like that, it will change code that's in there, and you need to kind of let it do that, or else certain things might not work without you having to get under the hood and really understand what's going on. So the answer that they give us is we're able to create what's called an HTML template. And that template we can make changes to, and then it'll base the one it generates every single time off of the template. Let me show you what I mean. Inside of website, I've got my FLA named website, automatically creates my website, HTML and JavaScript. So this one, this HTML file that's named the same thing as the FLA file gets overwritten every single time. Now, if I look at the HTML5 framework folder, there is a second HTML file in here. Besides the one that's named the same as the JavaScript and the FLA, there's one in there called template.html. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up also in my code editor. And now I can see that this is a little bit different. Here is my HTML file that has much more code and a bunch more colors littered throughout it. But this template HTML has a bunch of what are called placeholders. Has a bunch of little lines of code that start with a little $sign. And these basically tell Animate how to inject code in here based on a template of some kind, right? And this template has in it this, this background code that we want to use, so we don't have to necessarily, you know, put it in every time, and it's not going to disappear. As long as I can tell it to use this template, then it'll keep this code, and we can add whatever we want into the template, and it's not going to overwrite every single time. So let me show you how exactly to do this. The first step is we want to just copy, so you don't have to even write this code. You don't have to remember, you don't have to know where to put it. I just need to show you where exactly it is so you can edit this one line to change your background. There's a couple other things inside of this template that are beneficial. Like I said, this little highlight thing that I'll talk about. There's also kind of a code library that can help with some more advanced coding if anyone were to get a little more advanced as we go on. There's a couple little things in here, but what you want to do is go ahead and, again, make sure you have this HTML5 framework. If you don't already have this downloaded, please do that now. You want to make sure you have this HTML5 framework downloaded and somewhere where you can reference it. This has a lot of stuff in here that you can kind of check out and reference. So all we want to do is you just want to copy this template.html file and paste it into the root of your actual project folder. All right, so just pasted that in, so now all of a sudden I have a template.html file in there. So we paste this template HTML file in here, but there's a step inside of Animate we need to make to tell it to actually use it. All right, so far I showed you to download either Atom from atom.io or Sublime Text from sublimetext.com, just to give you a code editor that's a little easier to deal with this stuff. You could, again, technically use Notepad for Windows or Text Edit for Mac, as long as you go into Text Edit in those preferences and check that box I showed you earlier, so it'll actually show you the code. But once we downloaded this, all you really need to worry about once you've got your code editor is make sure you've got that HTML5 framework downloaded and copy this template HTML file directly into your project's folder, into the root, template HTML. And once it's in there, we don't need to care about what's in there yet, but what we care about is we need to tell Animate to use it. Right now, by default, it's just going to ignore it, and it's just going to use its own default template to build this every single time. But we need to go inside of Animate and tell it to use this file to build this one every single time. So anything that we customize inside of our template will make its way into our actual generated HTML file. So let me show you how to do that. Inside of Animate, I'm on my main project here, and I'm going to click on More Settings under Publish Settings. Again, you can get to that from the Properties panel if you just have nothing selected. So I can just click off into the ether. All my layers are locked anyway, so I don't have anything selected. I can open these publish settings, and I went through all these publish settings with you before, how to make it center stage, responsive, that include preloader, which is where you can get that default preloader thing. You can go ahead and choose your own preloader if you want to make your own animated GIF or download another animated GIF. All this stuff we've gone through before, but what we want to do is we want to go to the second tab over here, this HTML/JS tab. And you can see that it tells me directly underneath that HTML/JS tab, it tells me template for publishing HTML. And it says default template. So that means it's just using whatever it comes with. And all we need to do is click on Import New. And then I need to navigate to that folder and find that template.html and tell it to use it. And that's it. So mine is in my downloads folder, and I'm going to make sure I use the one that I copied inside of my website project folder here. So again, all we did is just copy this template HTML file from the HTML5 framework folder into our project folder, and I'm going to choose it, this template HTML. Hit open. Okay, so now here under template for publishing HTML, it says template and custom, and that's what we want. You definitely want to leave this checked, should be checked by default, this overwrite HTML file on publish, because that's what will overwrite it every time. And again, you do want that because certain things you change inside of Animate will write different code into that, and you want to keep that ability so as you add new features, they actually work when you open it in the browser. So the only thing we had to do is just click on Import New and go choose that template HTML file. So now that I've done that, now all of a sudden it's going to read whatever's in that template and it's going to publish that way. All right, so now I've got this black background. All right, so now that we have this, now I can go in and I can edit this template.html file to have whatever I want to show up when I publish. So I'm going to leave this tab open that I just published. So once I make changes to my file, I just have to save it. Well, actually, we do have to publish it again. I'll get to that. So I'm going to open up that template.html file. I don't even need anything else open, just that template HTML file. So once again, here from my website, I copied it out of HTML5 framework, pasted it into website. Inside of Animate, there's Animate, there we go. Opened more settings, went over to HTML, JavaScript, chose Import New, and then chose that actual template file. Okay, so now it's all connected. And once you do that, and it's all connected, copy it in the folder, do this. Now, I can open that HTML template or that template HTML file inside of my code editor. And it should look something like this. You don't really have to worry about anything that's in here except for this line right here on line 19 is showing the background line and what we're doing for the background. Now, if all you want to do is change the background color, what this is doing is this is changing the background color and the background image. And since I haven't put an image in there yet, named images/background.jpg, it's reverting back to only showing the color. All right, so if you only want to change the color and don't want an image, you could actually go in and you could delete all of this stuff in background except for just the hex color, and that's all you need. Now, if I look at my browser and I open the inspect panel, take it off responsive there. There we go. And I open the console. If I were to refresh this, I can see it's actually giving me this error, this unchecked runtime error. That always kind of happens when we're looking at things locally. We don't care about this one. But this one here, it's complaining that it can't find that background image. So it does silently fail. It doesn't break it. So it's not imperative that you take that out, but it's better to not have an error down here if you don't need one. So either you want to, once you get that template set up, you either want to create a background image and put it in your images folder. The best thing to do would be to actually name it bg.jpg. That way you don't have to change this code. Or if you name it something else like my background or whatever it's named, you just need to change it here to match what you actually put in your images folder. I'll do that in a moment. Right now, I'm just going to cut this part out to show you what you would do if you wanted to just change the background. So to just change the background, you can take this part out, and let's say I want to make it pure red again, just to see that it's changing. Change the hex color. I can hit save, and then when I'm changing my template, we have to actually import it into Animate again and publish it again for whatever these changes to take place, to stick. So I changed this, made it just the background, made it red, saved it, go back to my file here and hit refresh, and it doesn't change. It doesn't change to red. So what I have to do is I have to go back into Animate, back into more settings, back into HTML/JS, click import new, the one I just saved, publish it, and there's my changed color. All right, so once again, I know I keep showing you these steps, but all we have to do is just copy it from this folder, HTML5 framework, into our website folder, open it in a code editor, make the changes to the background that we want, and then we have to go inside of Animate and import it and actually put it in there. So again, if you want just to change the color, you can get rid of the rest of that code besides this hex, and then we can change the hex color to whatever. So let's say I want to try a different color. Let's see what, instead of FF00, let's see what 000FF is. I don't know that off the top of my head. So it's saved, and before I import it in Animate, it's not going to make a difference. It's just going to stay red. But once I go back into Animate and import the template again, import new, template, and then I have to publish also, because what's happening is when you publish, it's then using the template to create your HTML file. And once I've published, now it refreshes, and now it's blue. And that looks much better. In fact, for this bunnies one, I would probably want to go in and grab this exact blue at the top of my gradient, so it would kind of fit like that. Now, if you want to put a custom image in there, I'm going to undo this. Oh, it doesn't want to let me undo. So I'm going to go back to open up the template from my HTML5 framework. This right here. So I'm going to grab this, stick it in the one I'm currently editing. All right, so this will put it back to black, or it will load the image. Now, the reason you have both here is it'll actually show the background color until the image is loaded. So when it's online, it may take a moment or two to actually load this image. So what I need to do is I'm just going to create a background image and put it in my images folder named background, and then this should work. So first off, I'm actually going to save this template, and I'm going to import it. Again, that's super important. I make this mistake still. I'll make a change to my published template, and I'll forget to re-import it. The change won't take place. All right, so have it re-imported. I'll even republish it. So now it's ready to go. It has that code in it. If I refresh, this will be black. but it's looking for a background image that it can't find. So I'm going to go ahead and get a background image. I'm just going to yank it off of Google Images right now, and maybe let's search for bunny background. What can we find here? Oh, perfect. Let's get this bunny pattern background. I'm going to go grab this from Vector Easy. Oh, look, it's free. Fantastic. I'm just going to cheat and screenshot it. This doesn't need to be exact or perfect. Okay, grabbed it. And now I'm going to open Photoshop because I want to make this into a JPEG and I want to save it properly for the web. My screenshot, I'll just show you this on my desktop. Took this screenshot and it's fine as far as the size. It may stretch a little bit, but this screenshot is a PNG and it's not compressed for the web. See, it's 316 kilobytes. We should be able to get this down quite a bit lower. So I'm just going to open this inside Photoshop. Show you how we can properly create a background image. The size of this might be kind of funky, so it might like tile and do weird things. I'll show you how to mess with that. Again, the 1920 by 1080 is a good size for you. Photoshop is opening on my other screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I've got this. I'm not going to mess with the size for right now, but I am, under Photoshop, going to go to File, Export, and then Export As. And this is what we want to do when we export anything for the web. And instead of it being a PNG that's over 300K, I'm going to set it to a JPEG. And even without compressing it at all, at 100%, it goes down to 150K, so it's half the size. This is really important because you don't want your users to have to wait to see your images if they don't need to. So maybe I'll change this down to 50% quality. It still looks fine. Gets me all the way down to 34K, all right? So again, it's just extremely important whether you're working with a background image or if you're working with images that you're pulling into Animate, to make sure and size your images appropriately so they'll fit, and then also to kind of compress them so when you import them and use them, they'll be as small as possible. So I'm going to export this, and I'm going to export it to my downloads folder, where my website folder is. I'm going to go inside of images, and I'm going to name it bg.jpg, because that's what my code is looking for. Saved. Now if I go peek at my Finder, in my website folder inside of images, I've now got this background.jpg image that it's going to look for. Peek at my template code again. It is indeed looking for images/background.jpg. And then this other part after it is telling it not to tile, and it's telling it basically just to stay centered in the screen. So we'll see how that looks. But now that it's in there, and I already have this saved, I can go here, close these, and if I hit refresh, there's my background image. It's kind of just sticking there. I'm probably gonna wanna make it a little bigger. It's just sticking to the top, but it is in there. Let's say I want to go back into Photoshop, and in this case, I'm gonna make it bigger than I screenshot it, so we'll probably pixelate a little bit. If you're doing your own background image, you'll just wanna make sure that you make it this size, or you download it this size, a full HD size. So I'm gonna go into image size, and I'm gonna change my image size to this full HD. I'm even gonna let it break contrast, so this may look funky, but I'm gonna make it 1920 by 1080. So it's much, much bigger now. This is the size of my HD screen. Again, I'm gonna go to File, Export, Export As, make sure it's a JPEG, has some compression on it. So even though I made it HD size, it's still less than 100 kilobytes, which is great. So I'm gonna export this, overwrite my background.jpg file here. All right, and it's in there. So now if I look at my Finder, now I can see my background image is much bigger. And all I have to do is go refresh in here, and poof, now I have a big background that fills everything up. Now notice that you don't want to try and actually like match the background to what's going on in your movie, because it just is going to move around the way this is centered. It's going to move around on different parts of the background. So it's just up to you whether you want to keep it a solid color or you want to do a background image. Either way, you just need to copy that file from that template.html file, which has this code in it. And you can leave it the default. So I ended up leaving it exactly the default. I just ended up putting my background image in there. And it will default to having a black background until that image loads. If I were to use this bunny image, probably what I would do is I would go pick this color. In fact, I'll do it. I'm going to open up Photoshop. I'm going to pick this color here, grab the hex, and now I'm going to make a change to my template HTML file and have it use that background color as the backdrop until the image loads. So if I make that change, I have to save it. Now I have to go back into Animate, and I have to make sure and load my template in again. Import new template. So now it should update that, and now I'll publish it. And now my published version, we're not really seeing it because it loads instantaneously, but now it would actually show that color in the background instead of black while this image loads. And usually online, it'll take a second or two for a background image to load.